Do you remember that kid from that giant robot anime? Do you remember how it was always a he, cowered and hesitated at killing thousands of other people with his weapon of mass destruction, even if it was all for some ambiguously defined greater good? Bangai-O for the N64 takes piloting a mobile suit in a completely different direction. Let the player destroy anything and everything with little care for the consequences. Properly known as Bakuretsu Muteki Bangai-O, or Explosive Invincible Bangai-O, this treasure-developed title was unleashed on Japan in 1999. It was exclusive to Nintendo's 64-bit console for a few months before launching on the Dreamcast. The N64 version stayed in Japan, while the Dreamcast version later hit Europe and North America. Bangai-O remains one of the most expensive import titles you can find for the N64, both because its production run was limited to 10,000 copies, and it's just incredibly fun to play. Gameplay centers on the titular mech Bangai-O and its capacity to obliterate everything on screen. The two pilots, Ricky and Mami, each have their own distinct shots that you can instantaneously switch between. Ricky shoots homing missiles that work best in open spaces, but they become useless in narrow corridors. That's when you're better off with Mami, whose green projectiles deal slightly less damage than Ricky's missiles, but bounce around until hitting an enemy. As you progress through the game, you rely more and more upon the special charge shot. After holding down the charge button, Bangai-O releases an overwhelming wave of projectiles. The longer you hold down the button, the more shots you fire. The attack depends upon your special meter, which you recharge by picking up the fruit stored in destroyable buildings scattered around the map. Levels unfold essentially the same way every time. Make your way past enemies and obstacles, find the boss, and blow him up to finish the level. Stages run under a few minutes, although there are complicated mazes that can take longer, but don't expect to spend much more than 5 minutes to complete most levels, not counting all the times you die. The game runs pretty smoothly, except for moments that the system limps while drawing so many objects on the screen at once. The N64 almost implodes on special stages where you plow through both obstacles and enemies at a rapid pace. The Dreamcast version doesn't experience the same frame rate issues, but that was a new console at the time of release, and the N64 had been out for more than 3 years at that point. And for a title that came out in 1999, it's pretty self-aware for a game that encourages you to annihilate and explode as many things as possible. Whenever you destroy a building to plunder the fruit inside, you hear the terrified screams of the people you just killed. Get blown up by the enemy? Scream. Even one of the bosses screams when you shoot him. Although the boss dies in loud farting sound, so I don't think the game takes an incredibly mature look at violence. And things get even weirder from that point. Your enemies are a gang of fruit smugglers that include Butt-Chin Space Elvis and get progressively more absurd. There's Ball-Chin Man, a woman who speaks to you in pictures, a literal sketch of a boss, and your evil red-lipped twin. The lady that explains everything to you could also be a tree, but I'm not quite sure. If you thought that would be hard to localize, then check out the Game Over screen for the N64 version. You can actually tell a lot about regional sensibilities in the ways this single screen was changed to fit the American and European markets for the Dreamcast release. In Europe, they kept the KKK member but got rid of the 64 on his head to symbolize the Dreamcast. I guess an American audience wasn't okay with a naked boy chasing a white supremacist while a pedophile alien takes pictures because the North American version added some clothes and a pink monster wearing an apron. Even in a censored form, Bangai-O should have seen life on the N64 outside of Japan. It would have been a high-class asset in the console wars of the time, but for whatever reason, Treasure didn't see any value in pursuing a wider N64 release. There's a lot of different ways you can play Bangai-O now, including an HD remaster for the Xbox Live Arcade. But for me, I'll stick with the N64 version. It's the kind of quirky, explosive game that I would have played in between watching Dragon Ball Z and Gundam Wing. And I wouldn't have thought much about hearing the screams of innocent people as I destroy their houses to plunder illegal space fruit. Thanks for watching, and mahalo.